Gaza, 2025. Possibly one of the most dangerous places in the world, especially if you're a journalist. With the borders firmly shut to foreign media, local reporters serve as one of the few ways we can see what is happening on the ground. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, at least 165 Palestinian journalists have been killed since the Israel-Hamas war began in October 2023. Israel said early on in the war that it could not guarantee safety of journalists in Gaza. But according to CPJ, last year was the deadliest year for journalists worldwide since they began documenting deaths in 1992. As much of the Gaza Strip is now lying in ruins, reporters are working hard to try and capture the scale of destruction. The best view is from above, but sending up a drone in this region is fraught with danger. Shot from above, the dangerous work of drone journalists in Gaza. The full cost of the war still needs to be assessed through on-the-ground visits when a permanent ceasefire is agreed, but the extent of the destruction across the territory can already be seen. Almost 300,000 homes have reportedly been damaged or destroyed. The conflict has resulted in 95% of hospitals becoming non-operational. According to the most recent interim damage assessment by the World Bank, rebuilding will be a mammoth task. Thousands have been left homeless and essential services have been devastated. Satellite imagery, as well as footage and imagery taken by journalists using drones, has been critical in assessing the destruction. Those choosing to cover the conflict by capturing video and images with drones have done so at great personal risk, with some paying the ultimate price. Bellingcat worked with a consortium made up of Forbidden Stories, Paper Trail Media, Le Monde, Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism, 972 Magazine, Radio France International, France 24, Der Standard, and Die Zeit, who interviewed the journalists, their friends and family, and press freedom experts. Those featured have shared their experience and detailed why they feel drone reporting was worth the risk. Alongside our partners, Bellingcat has continued to map and show the scale of destruction in Gaza. When our investigation consortium asked, the IDF did not answer specific questions about the individuals who are referenced in this video, but they did tell us the IDF rejects outright the allegation of systemic attacks on journalists. They mentioned that tragically journalists and civilians had been harmed as a result of the conflict, and that they take all feasible measures to mitigate harm to civilians, including journalists. They also claimed that the IDF only strikes members of organized armed groups and individuals directly participating in hostilities.
لما الحرب هذه بلشت الحرب الأخيرة حرب 23 كنت رافض فكرة التصوير نهائيا لسببين. السبب الأول إنه موضوع الدرون كان عبارة عن خطر، وموضوع الصحافة بشكل عام كان خطر. كان أي حد صحفي بيطلع بيصور بيتم استهدافه بشكل مباشر. كان في هذاك الوقت نستشهد أكثر من 130 شخص من أصدقاء الصحفيين، جزء منهم بيعملوا معايا في ضمن المؤسسة اللي أنا بشتغل فيها الأونروا، تم استهدافهم جوا بيوتهم، ما كانش على رأس عمله. فالأمر كان مرعب وبيخوف. الأمر الثاني إنه أنا بعتبر حالي مش شخص مصور حروب، مش شخص بصور دمار، فأنا حسيت بالمسؤولية الصحفية اللي على عاتقي، إنه أنت صحفي، والصحفي يعني هذا كنت دائما أنا حوار أحكي مع نفسي، لا يا عبد الله لازم تطلع تصور، أنت صحفي وأنت صحفي حر، والصحفي الحر مش بس بيصور غزة في وقت الرخاء وفي وقت الجمال، لا، في رسالة كبيرة على عاتقك لازم أنت تروح تمارسها.
Palestinian journalist Abdullah Al-Haj took photos for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, or UNRWA, and previously worked as a photojournalist for the Jerusalem-based Palestinian newspaper Al-Quds, as well as other media organizations. His Instagram is full of videos from before the war showing Gaza from the sky using his drone. This is another one of his videos. It was shared on social media by UNRWA on February 15th, 2024. Abdullah has almost 300 photos on UNRWA's film and photo archive, and there are some aerial photos listed taken by Abdullah in 2020. A little over a week after the drone video was shared by UNRWA on February 15th, Abdullah was back in al-Shati refugee camp on February 24th, filming with his drone once again when he was seriously injured in an Israeli army strike. Abdullah told our partners at Forbidden Stories that he only spent a short time filming with the drone and had finished filming when he was hit.
صورت فقط 7 دقائق وخلصت تصوير وتم استهدافي مباشرة والصاروخ اللي أجا فغيبت عن الوعي فورًا، ما حسيتش بأي شيء، أنا صحيت من الغيبوبة بعد 3 أيام.
Using Planet Labs satellite imagery and drone footage taken during the ceasefire, Bellingcat was able to rebuild al-Shati refugee camp using a 3D photogrammetry model to highlight the scale of destruction there. The 3D models produced with photogrammetry allow viewers to place themselves in the environment and better understand details of a site, crater damage, debris from buildings, and camps for displaced people. Details so small that they can't always be captured in satellite imagery. Within the model, you can see the destroyed Shuhada al-Shati Mosque and newly constructed camps on the damaged archaeological site. This is approximately where Abdullah was standing when he was hit. The IDF previously told Le Monde that it had, quote, eliminated by an IAF aircraft a terrorist cell using a drone, posing an imminent threat to forces in the Shati area, unquote. Apparently, the same strike was referenced in this reporting on a Telegram group run by Emmanuel Fabian, the military correspondent for the Times of Israel. Abdullah told our partners at Forbidden Stories the accusation that he was affiliated with Hamas was a false and unfounded charge. It's not clear where the threatened Israeli forces were located. The Times of Israel reported that the IDF conducted a 2-week-long raid in al-Shati refugee camp in early February, but this raid was reportedly finished by February 15th. Based on SkySat imagery from Planet Labs, IDF vehicles are visible earlier in the month on February 8th, about 2.5 kilometers from al-Shati refugee camp near Gaza City's Islamic University campus. The vehicles were gone a week later in February 14th imagery. Photos and videos show that the IDF were present about 3.5 kilometers south of al-Shati refugee camp along the Al-Rashid Road throughout the month of February, though it's not clear if they were still present at the location when Abdullah was filming. Abdullah, now residing in Qatar, is still recovering from the attack. Both of his legs had to be partially amputated. He is lucky to be alive. Others were also killed in the strike. He claims he was checked by IDF troops when in the hospital after the attack and at the Netzarim checkpoint when he was transported out of Gaza by ambulance. He says he was cleared on both occasions by the IDF and was able to leave. He received medical treatment in Qatar.
اللي تم استهدافنا 2 أطفال وأنا والشاب التاني اللي ضل طيب، إحنا التنين كنا جوا مستشفى الشفا. لو في واحد فينا حماس كان راح على الاعتقال فورًا، ولو أنا حماس كان ما طلعت من قطاع غزة للعلاج.
The idea was if there is a drone in the sky and it's not one of ours, meaning we don't have a written, we don't know that this one is ours, it goes down.
Michael Offer Ziv saw the scale of demolition from the front lines. He was a reservist in the IDF, serving as a control officer during the first 2 months of the conflict. His role was to oversee where each unit was at any given time, making sure the IDF weren't firing on themselves. During the conflict, he noted increased drone use by both the IDF and by Hamas, and claimed he remembered 2 incidents in the time he served where they located a drone operator, one of which they fired. He finished his tour in December and has refused to return to service, signing a letter stating that he is no longer willing to participate in the war.
When you're in the war room and you look and you see all the things to the maps and the drones footage and everything, it looks like a video game. It looks like something that is very far away. It's very easy to not think that those are actual buildings, like houses. The way you usually take down a drone, there are a lot of technological ways. This is what you usually do. There are ways to cut it off from the controller and make it go down. Sort of some sort of malfunctioning it in air. Those are usually where you take down drone, because shooting at a drone is the chances of actually hitting the drone and actually hitting a part of the drone that is significant for its so usually we have system for that. But that would be the general idea was if a drone goes up, it comes down. And if you recognize someone who is operating a drone, they are immediately suspicious, right? And as you can hear before, suspicious a lot of time means shoot to kill, right? You don't ask questions. Someone is operating a drone, they're a target. They're a legitimate target. Most of the time, at least where I was, that was the gist.
When asked, the IDF did not answer specific questions about the rules of engagement or specific policies on drones. The IDF said that they cannot address operational directives as they are classified, but stated that every strike complies with the rules of law and armed conflict. Reserve Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hirsch, who served for 19 years in the Israeli Army's legal corps, told our partners at Paper Trail Media there is an inherent risk in flying a drone during a conflict in proximity to fighting forces. He said that if a soldier spotted a drone in a combat zone near fighting forces, quote, I certainly wouldn't assume any wrongdoing if that drone and its operators were targeted. It wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that they were part of an enemy force, unquote. For others, it's not so clear-cut. We spoke to Doja Daoud, who is part of the Middle East and North Africa program at the Committee to Protect Journalists.
Mu'taz al-Azaiza, at the beginning of the war, Mu'taz was using a drone, which, according to his testimony, was hijacked by Israeli soldiers and taken away from him. That drone was never retrieved. So there are other ways to deal with a drone, even in conflict areas or in a proximity of Israeli soldiers, without killing a journalist. Journalists shouldn't be killed and should be protected under international law. The deliberate targeting of journalists and civilians constitutes a war crime.
Mustafa Thuraya used his drone to capture imagery in Gaza for Al Jazeera, AFP, Reuters, and Getty Images, among others. He wrote in his notes, as aerial photographers, we bear a great responsibility to convey the message of our people and the bright image of Gaza, in light of the significant challenges facing the Strip. This is not just a hobby, but also carries the concerns and groans of our people. Our message to everyone is that we will always be present on the ground to fulfill our leadership role and achieve our goals. On January 7th, 2024, Mustafa and his colleague Hamza Al-Dadu went to capture footage of Nasser village northeast of Rafah for Al Jazeera. That day, Mustafa and Hamza never returned home. According to reporting by the Washington Post, Mustafa and Hamza arrived at the location that they were filming at about 10:30 a.m. when an airstrike forced them to leave the area by car. They were following an ambulance when they were struck by the IDF while on the road at approximately 11:10 a.m. Both were killed. Mustafa's widow told Forbidden Stories that her husband's work was necessary. Quote, it was necessary to show the outside world the brutality of the occupation and its aggression against his homeland, unquote. The IDF initially claimed that the January 7th strike on Thuraya and Al-Dadu's car was in response to drone activity that posed a threat to IDF troops. The Israeli military later released further reasoning for the strike, stating that Israel's military intelligence department had confirmed that Al-Dadu was a member of Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Thuraya was a member of Hamas, something rejected by both Al Jazeera, who they were working for at the time, and the journalists' families. Mustafa's wife told us, quote, this is wrong because that's their job, and they were filming without posing any danger to anyone. This is an injustice and a slander against the photographers because they are not terrorists. I lost safety and security in this world after him. I lost a comfortable life with his loss. I lost all means of comfort in this world with his loss. I became a body without a soul, unquote. The closest potential IDF activity to where the strike on Mustafa's vehicle took place that Bellingcat could find was more than 5 kilometers away. We identified clearing activity that was visible near a cluster of buildings in Planet Skysat imagery from the day of the strike. An analysis by the Washington Post last year came to a similar conclusion regarding the IDF presence near where Mustafa was filming, finding no evidence of IDF military activity or deployments within a 2-kilometer area of the site that they searched. In many of Mustafa's videos, he can be seen wearing a clearly labeled press vest. It is not known if he was wearing such a vest on the day of the attack. His friend Shadi Al-Tabatibi previously told the Washington Post that Mustafa had worked for around 5 years as a photographer for the Ministry of Religious Endowments, part of Gaza's Hamas-led government, but it's unclear when his employment ended.
We think that whoever accuses a journalist of being a terrorist and says that they have evidence should release that evidence and make it clear that what they're saying is true. Otherwise, it is not our job to prove that a journalist was a terrorist. It is our job to defend journalists and advocate for them and their safety, to be able to do their work freely and to deliver life-saving information to the public.
The recent 2-month ceasefire allowed Forbidden Stories to organize the operation of drones for filming in the north of Gaza. We are able to use this footage to showcase the scale of destruction in Jabalia refugee camp using a 3D model. This is what the largest refugee camp in the Palestinian territory looked like as of 3 weeks ago. Jabalia was the location of one of the most deadly attacks in Gaza during the war so far, where according to the conflict monitoring website Air Wars, at least 126 civilians, including 68 children, were killed on October 31st, 2023. Despite the perceived safety blanket of the recent ceasefire, 2 IDF airstrikes in the northern Gazan city of Beit Lahia killed at least 7 people on the 15th of March. This included Mahmoud Samir Islam al-Bassous, the drone journalist used earlier in the month by Forbidden Stories for this photogrammetry capture. Al-Bassous was killed while carrying out a project for a UK-Turkey-based charity. The IDF claimed the strikes targeted, quote, terrorists, including 2 operating a drone, and released a list of names and photos. The drone photographer Mahmoud Samir Islam al-Bassous was neither named nor pictured in the list of terrorists. Instead, the IDF listed another individual under a similar name, describing him as a Hamas terrorist operating under journalistic cover, while suggesting a link between the drone used in Beit Lahia and Islamic Jihad. Al-Kahir Foundation, who the group were working with at the time of the strikes, also, quote, utterly refute any claims that their team were connected to militants. They say that the members were deliberately targeted while on a purely humanitarian mission. According to our findings, we geolocated 2 strikes. The first at an IDP camp in northern Beit Lahia, about 2 kilometers from the Israeli border and IDF outpost near it, and a second strike about 3 kilometers away. Asked twice by the consortium to provide evidence, the IDF refused, stating it, quote, will not elaborate on the published statements, unquote. Mahmoud Samir Islam al-Bassous' name has been added to the CPJ's list of journalists killed in Gaza. During the ceasefire, drone imagery was still too dangerous to capture in the south of Gaza. Now, with the ceasefire over, drone imagery may be inaccessible anywhere in Gaza. High-resolution satellite imagery such as that from Planet Labs remains one of the most accessible ways to observe destruction in Rafah, which borders Egypt. Bellingcat reported on this issue last year, though even more buildings have been destroyed in the period since. Hundreds of buildings in both central Rafah, near the large marketplace, and the Al Janina neighborhood have been demolished since. Let's take a look at this eastern neighborhood in Rafah's Tal as-Sultan. This is what it looked like on July 17th, 2024, before the IDF operation in that area. And here we see the same neighborhood a week later on July 27th. And now here's an image of the same neighborhood, captured after the ceasefire on January 30th, 2025. The few remaining buildings in the Tal as-Sultan neighborhood we examined in the July imagery have been completely razed. This is the damage along what's called the Philadelphia Corridor, an 8-mile-long strip along the Gaza-Egypt border where the IDF announced they had operational control of in May of last year. This image is taken from November 2023. Then, here's the same area from August the following year, with more destruction visible. And finally, from January 30th this year. The small village of Al-Qarya al-Swediya, or the Swedish village on the coast, was wiped out completely in June 2024. It then appeared to become a staging area for IDF troops. January 2025 imagery shows a communications pylon has been set up and IDF vehicles continue to park there. The Brazil refugee camp and the wider Al-Salam neighborhood in South Rafah followed a similar pattern of destruction. Now, the few remaining buildings in the Al Salam neighborhood have been almost completely demolished, and there's been even more destruction in nearby neighborhoods. While satellite imagery can give us an indication of the scale of what is left on the ground, it's drone footage, as some journalists have managed to capture in other parts of Gaza, that provides a more detailed view. But how difficult is it to gain an accurate picture of events in Gaza, and what obligations do combatants have to protect journalists in Gaza? We shared our findings with Irene Khan, the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression and Opinion, and asked her about the possible targeting and killing and injuring of drone journalists in Gaza.
I think there has been a tendency on the side of the IDF to assume that some of these journalists have links with Hamas and therefore are targets, are legitimate targets. And that has come through sometimes in the way in which the IDF has tried afterwards to excuse and say, look, we didn't make a mistake. We made a mistake, but the person was behaving in a suspicious way, or there was other circumstantial evidence to suggest that they are Hamas. But we know that too many journalists have been killed for this to be simply an error. And of course, when drones are used, it does raise the risk, does increase the risk for journalists. I think there needs to be much more done to make the international community, the leaders, the world leaders, realize that getting information out from Gaza, good information, reliable, robust information out, is as important as getting food into Gaza. And therefore, journalists have to be protected as civilians, but as civilians who are putting their lives on the line to save others. They need to be protected. And again, I come back to the question of issue of impunity. It has to be addressed. So every time a journalist is killed, there should be a full investigation as to what happened, and to make sure that if there was a mistake made, what are they doing about correcting those mistakes?
Despite calls for investigations into the above incidents, the IDF has not confirmed the status of the specific cases highlighted in this video. They did provide a general statement outlining how, quote, the incidents have been referred to the relevant mechanisms for further examination, unquote. But they did not provide any further details on which cases we asked about were being investigated or what the outcome of those investigations would lead to. They also said that the IDF takes all feasible measures to mitigate harm to civilians, including journalists, telling us, quote, military operations are conducted due to operational and security needs in accordance with international law. They added that, quote, exceptional incidents are subject to lessons learned processes and are thoroughly examined and addressed accordingly by the appropriate enforcement mechanisms, unquote. Relevant cases may lead to, quote, command, disciplinary, or criminal measures, unquote, they said. Some journalists are continuing to film with mobile phones, cameras, and drones, regardless of the risks. As the recent ceasefire collapses, the risk to journalists operating on the ground is likely to increase yet again, heavily restricting our view of the impact of the conflict on communities in the Gaza Strip.